Today I want to make a public statement, a public proclamation, which is, I think, beneficial for the occult community as a whole. Maergjirah Cabal, which is the order led by Marcus McCarthy, is one of the few legitimate magical orders within this occult community. Maergjirah Cabal produces work with older deities in new, refined fashion. And I need to give a public praise to Maergjirah Cabal for essentially bringing, in a sense, the current of the Slavic god Chernobog to the Western audiences in a way which is not fraudulent and doesn't engage in enormous amount of cultural appropriation. So there is a lot of unfair criticism of Maergjirah Cabal in the occult community, and as somebody who is pretty much in a daily contact with Maergjirah members, Hezekiah, Tomb of the Scarab, Robin Lucas, somebody who interviewed Marcus with Joseph, I can safely say that the Cabal is full of legitimate magical practitioners willing to advance the craft and willing to advance the community. Now, regarding the Blighted as a group of gods, what I can safely say is that despite not being officially a member of the Maergjirah, I work with two entities which are part of the Blighted. So I work with Chernobog and I work with the Spider Queen. Through the Spider Queen I got introduced via material from VK, while I essentially work with Chernobog as somebody who is from the Slavic background. And so I can safely say, without any doubt, that Blighted are real spirits. It's a real pantheon, and the guys from the Maergjirah are communicating with the entities which are real, and they have their own magical practices and rituals, which are having their own merit and are legitimate. And so after we got it out of the way, essentially I will discuss Slavic sorcery and why I will never teach Slavic sorcery to people, why I made that firm decision, and I will also explain why majority of the Haitians essentially don't teach white people the true secrets of Haitian voodoo. Now, I published a video interview with Tani Manora about her initiation in Haitian voodoo, and what was pretty clear from interview is that voodoo guys pretty much didn't teach Alima nor anybody who is white in that group of hers, which she herself admitted they didn't teach them a lot. And she was really dissatisfied with the amount of closeness and secrecy Wudan possessed. I can assure you that the same amount of closeness and secrecy is something present within Balkan witchcraft community. I actually think that the Balkan witchcraft communities are much more secretive than the Wudan ones, because in Balkan witchcraft essentially not only you have to be Serb or Valachian to learn it, but you also have to be member of a certain family, and you can only be taught by the members of your family or by somebody who lives in your village or your neighboring surroundings. You cannot simply go to the witch in the village and say, hey, I want to be taught how to work with spirit so and so. You need to have somebody who is from the bloodline, who will be in contact with the current, and who will teach you how to work with that and how to call them upon. Now, this is something Western people don't understand. This is something which is impossible to explain to the modern Westerners. But there is no just this thing. There is also another concept which is non-understandable to the modern Western sorcerer. And that concept is the fact that there is no such a thing as living godhood or living gods in all traditions. Human living gods. You know? Sorcerers and witches are venerated by the people essentially, but they are not venerated because they are important. They are venerated because they are vehicles for certain divine energies, for certain spirits. And so people venerate the spirit through giving respect to the practitioner. What is pretty well understood within Slavic and Wallachian witchcraft is that the witch can obtain certain powers only after boons to the spirits are performed. You cannot expect to have certain abilities before you fulfill your obligations to the spirits. Servitude to the spirits comes before servitude to the self. In Balkan witchcraft and in many other forms of witchcraft, for example, tantric sorcery, you gonna abolish the ego and you gonna serve the spirits and you gonna do what you are told. You are not allowed to ask questions to your spirit guides. When they tell you to do something after you opened your psychic abilities, it is understood that you have to do your devotional rituals. When I say devotional, I don't refer to the petty prayers and little bit of an offering. I refer to the physical actions and heavy ritual practices you have to do in order to earn the favor of the spirit in question. This is something which involves enormous amount of effort, enormous amount of hard work, an enormous amount of devotion. So, after you engage in such practices, over time, you will receive rituals which will allow you to work on a higher level and manifest your desires. But manifestation of your desires comes after you did your devotion, after you did your rituals, after you have proven to the spirits that they can count on you, and then they give you actual secrets. But the modern Western sorcery is failing because they turned things on its head. And after we cleared this out, what's wrong with the modern Western practitioners, I will explain why I will never teach majority of Westerners how to work with Slavic spirits. I taught only one guy how to work with Marana, and that was because he needed help and he was terminally ill. So I needed to show him some stuff in order for the guy to be healthy again. But for majority of people who ask me about Slavic sorcery, the answer is no. And I will say why the answer is no. So, for example, Majoran and Cabal does good work, and Marcus knows how to work with Chernobyl. Marcus is not a guy who appropriates nonsense. He is really a real deal, and Cabal is a real deal. But not everybody is a Cabal. You see, majority of people, when you give them powerful traditional witchcraft, when you give them powerful methodologies, what they really do is they don't follow the protocol. They don't do what you tell them to do. Okay? They essentially call the entity once or twice, cut the rituals to the point they are unrecognizable, and then they add a bunch of their own bullshit in it, which usually doesn't work. And then they present it as their own revolutionary methodology. They rebrand that nonsense, and then they present it as their own, with complete disregard to a culture and with complete disregard to the question, is the shit they are presenting working or not? And I have seen it over and over again with different traditions being absolutely butchered by Western magicians who don't know what they are talking about at all, who have zero respect for the spirit, who have zero respect for the culture, who have zero respect for the efficacy of magic. So, in order to avoid this to happen to Slavic current, I will never teach it to foreigners. There will be a few exceptions, but more or less, Slavic sorcery will not be on YouTube. Never. Slavic sorcery will not be the part of mentorship program, and Slavic sorcery will not be taught to people who hate Slavs. I am pretty clear, because a lot of people, they want to learn Slavic and Valachian sorcery, but they want to genocide Russia and Ukraine. They want to destroy all of the Slavic countries, and they consider us all to be barbarians and savages, and they have crazy stories in their heads about how Slavs want to destroy them or something, and they claim to back it with evidence, and I have seen this happening pretty severely during when the Russia-Ukraine conflict started. Before Russia-Ukraine conflict started, it still existed, anti-Slavic hatred, but not to this extent. Since Russia and Ukraine conflict started, essentially, any Slavic country which is not with NATO is literally publicly lynched. If you support any of those Slavic countries who are not with NATO, you are publicly lynched. And also, if you support countries of Slavic nations who are with NATO, for example, they politely try to explain to you that Slavs need to civilize themselves additionally because they are savages. And this is the narrative I have been hearing for years. This is just intensifying because of Russia and Ukraine conflict. And what you people from the Western world have to understand is not everyone thinks like you. Your value system is not the best in history, and different peoples and nations have a complete right to think differently than you do. And also, Western capitalism is not the best system in history, and different nations and cultures have their own right to think differently than you do and have different ways of governing themselves. Now, what I see during this Russia and Ukraine conflict is one pretty perverse, in a way, cultural shift, right? And one pretty perverse cultural misunderstanding. which is propagated by the media. So essentially, what they did in the media is they essentially presented all of the values of traditional Slavic culture, Eastern Slavic culture, such as, Orthodox Christianity, a Slavic folk religion, Slavic customs. They presented all of that due to the Russian invasion of Ukraine as some anti-civilizational, barbaric bloodlust, right? And they kinda created a narrative and that narrative is Ukraine is good because Ukraine is for the Western culture, and Russia is bad because Russia wants to destroy democracy, and Russia is whatever. And everybody who supports culture which is similar to Russian should be fucking genocided and destroyed. That is the fucking narrative, and Ukraine is good. But Ukraine isn't good because Ukraine has its own cultural values. The reason why Ukraine is good according to the media is because Ukraine accepts Western culture. And if you have this narrative in your head, if you hate Slavic culture and Slavic tradition, don't expect from me to teach you Slavic shit, nor anybody else. Okay? Now, I have already publicly stated in previous videos of mine what I think about Slavic war, Slavic civil war between Ukrainians and Russians. I have already made my point, and I am not pro-Russia nor pro-Ukraine. I clearly said that what is going on is a war between Russian oligarchs and Ukrainian oligarchs. In a way, because there is a trade issue going on regarding gas and energy. So, thank you for watching and see you tomorrow. And once again, I ask my audience to not pay attention to the people who slander Majorayan Cabal for no reason, because those people didn't produce anything worthy of attention themselves. Talk to you soon.